Why does letting go of this person feel impossible, even after they hurt you, ignored you, or disappeared from your life? Why does your heart still reach for someone your mind already knows you should release? Maybe you think it's love. Maybe you think they were the one. But what if the real reason has nothing to do with romance at all? What if the pain of letting go is actually tied to something much deeper inside you, something ancient, hidden, and unfinished? There are people who leave your life quietly, and then there are people who leave fingerprints on your soul. The strange part is, sometimes the ones who damage us the most become the hardest to forget. Not because they were perfect, not because they truly saw us, but because somewhere in their presence they awakened a version of us we became addicted to chasing. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And that is exactly what happens here. You think you are grieving a person, when in reality you are grieving the meaning your heart attached to them. This video is not about chasing closure. It's about uncovering the invisible emotional chains that keep you attached long after the relationship is gone. And by the end of this journey, you may realize something shocking. You were never just trying to hold on to them. You were trying to hold on to a part of yourself you feared losing forever. Part 1. The person became a mirror of your emotional hunger. There is a dangerous kind of connection that doesn't begin with love. It begins with recognition. The moment someone walks into your life and touches a wound you've carried silently for years, your soul reacts before your logic does, and suddenly their attention feels healing, their validation feels sacred, their presence feels like oxygen. This is why letting go feels unbearable, because the attachment was never only about them, it was about the emotional starvation they temporarily relieved. Maybe they made you feel chosen after years of feeling invisible. Maybe they listened to you during a season when nobody else cared. Maybe they gave you warmth during a time you secretly felt emotionally abandoned. The human heart remembers relief more powerfully than reason. And once someone becomes associated with emotional safety, your mind begins treating them less like a person and more like survival itself. That's why even toxic relationships can feel addictive. A thirsty person does not question dirty water. Buddha warned that attachment is the root of suffering, but most people misunderstand this. Attachment is not love. Attachment is the fear that without this person you will return to emotional emptiness. So every memory becomes magnified, every text becomes sacred, every small moment becomes proof that the connection meant something. But sometimes what you are grieving is not the loss of the person. You are grieving the collapse of the emotional world they helped you escape into. And this is why healing feels confusing. Because part of you knows the relationship hurt you, while another part still sees them as the answer to your loneliness. The hardest truth arrives quietly. People who awaken your wounds can feel like soulmates because they touch the deepest unmet needs within you. The question is not, why can't I let them go? The real question is, what emotional hunger did they temporarily feed inside you? Because once you understand that, the attachment begins to loosen, and for the first time you stop chasing them and start understanding yourself. Part 2. You're not addicted to them. You're addicted to the hope. There is a cruel illusion the human heart creates when reality becomes too painful to accept. It takes fragments of affection, scattered moments of tenderness, tiny glimpses of possibility, and builds an entire future out of them, a future so emotionally vivid that losing the person begins to feel like losing destiny itself. This is why letting go can feel like mourning a life that never even existed. You weren't only attached to who they were, you became attached to who you hoped they would become. And hope, especially emotional hope, is one of the strongest psychological drugs a human being can experience. Nietzsche once wrote, "Hope, in reality, is the worst of all evils because it prolongs the torments of man." At first, that sounds dark, but look deeper. Hope can become dangerous when it keeps you emotionally chained to someone who continuously gives you just enough to stay, but never enough to feel secure. One day they were distant. The next day they were loving again. One moment they made you feel forgotten. The next moment they made you feel irreplaceable, and your nervous system became trapped inside the cycle. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism behind addiction. When affection becomes unpredictable, the brain clings harder, not softer. Because uncertainty intensifies emotional obsession, you begin chasing the next moment of warmth the way a starving person waits for crumbs. That's why, even after the relationship ends, your mind replays memories obsessively. Not because the relationship was always beautiful, but because your heart is still trying to finish the unfinished story. You keep thinking, maybe they'll come back wiser. Maybe they'll finally understand my value. Maybe this wasn't the end. But the painful reality is this: sometimes the fantasy of who someone could become prevents you from accepting who they repeatedly showed themselves to be. And that realization cuts deeply because it forces you to grieve two losses at once: the loss of the person and the loss of the future you secretly built around them. This is why closure feels so difficult, because you are not only releasing memories, you are releasing imagined conversations, imagined healing, imagined years together that your soul quietly rehearsed in private. But healing begins the moment you stop asking, what if they change? And start asking, why am I sacrificing my peace for potential instead of reality? Because love built on possibility will always keep your heart suspended between longing and disappointment. And eventually, you must decide, will you continue loving the dream of them, or finally return to the truth of yourself? Part 3. The heart confuses familiar pain with love. Not all attachments are created from happiness. Some are born from recognition. And the most dangerous connections often feel familiar before they feel healthy. That familiarity can become a prison. Have you ever noticed how some people walk into your life and instantly feel right, even when they hurt you? There's an eerie comfort in the chaos. You forgive what should not be forgiven. You tolerate emotional distance. You excuse inconsistency, and deep down, a quiet voice whispers, "This feels like home." But what if home was where your wounds were created? Carl Jung believed we are unconsciously drawn toward people who mirror unresolved parts of ourselves. Not because they are good for us, but because the psyche desperately wants to revisit old pain in hopes of finally mastering it. This is why many people repeat emotional patterns without realizing it. If you grew up chasing approval, you may become attached to emotionally unavailable people. If love once felt unpredictable, chaos may now feel romantic. If affection was conditional, you may confuse anxiety with passion. And suddenly, peace feels boring, while suffering feels meaningful. That is the tragedy. Your nervous system can mistake emotional instability for connection because it recognizes the emotional rhythm. The highs and lows, the silence and reassurance, the longing and reward, all of it becomes psychologically familiar. So even when the relationship drains you, part of your mind still interprets it as love. This is why some people cannot walk away even when they know they are unhappy. The attachment is not logical, it is conditioned. The ancient philosopher Lao Tzu once said, "Care about what other people think and you will always be their prisoner." But emotional attachment goes even deeper than that. Sometimes you are not imprisoned by another person. You are imprisoned by the emotional blueprint you inherited long before you met them. And until you recognize that blueprint, you will continue searching for healing in the same places that wounded you. Think about how many times you ignored your intuition just to keep someone close. How many nights you convinced yourself that their mixed signals meant depth. How many times you accepted crumbs because part of you feared complete abandonment more than quiet suffering? That fear changes people. It makes them over-explain, overweight, over-forgive. Because losing the connection feels less terrifying than facing the emptiness underneath it. But one day, a painful realization arrives. You were not fighting to keep love alive. You were fighting to keep familiar pain alive because uncertainty felt even scarier. And healing begins the moment you stop asking, "Why do I still love them?" and courageously ask, "Why does suffering feel so familiar to me?" Because the answer to that question can change your entire life. Part 4. Letting go feels like losing part of your identity. There comes a moment after every deep attachment where silence begins to feel unbearable. The messages stop, the routines disappear, the emotional intensity fades, and suddenly you are left alone with a terrifying question: who am I without this connection? Most people think heartbreak is only emotional pain, but heartbreak is also identity collapse, because when someone becomes emotionally central to your life, they slowly intertwine themselves with your routines, your thoughts, your future, your sense of meaning. You don't just build memories with them, you build yourself around them. And that is why letting go can feel like psychological death. You are not only grieving a person, you are grieving the character you became in their story. Maybe you became softer with them, more hopeful, more alive. Maybe for the first time in years, you allowed yourself to dream again. And when they left, it felt as though they took that hopeful version of you with them. This is why people often say, "I don't feel like myself anymore." Because the self they knew became emotionally attached to another human being. The philosopher Camus once wrote, "In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer." But heartbreak blinds us to that truth. It convinces us that the light we felt came from them alone. So when they disappear, life suddenly looks colorless. But here is the revelation most people discover too late. The love, depth, softness, and beauty you experienced were not created by them. They awakened qualities that already existed within you. Read that again carefully. You are mourning parts of yourself you accidentally handed over to another person. That is why healing is not about replacing them. It is about reclaiming yourself, slowly, quietly, painfully. It happens the first night you stop checking your phone, the first morning you enjoy your own company again, the first time laughter escapes your body without guilt, the first moment you realize peace feels safer than emotional chaos. And eventually, something extraordinary happens. You stop romanticizing the pain. You begin seeing the connection clearly, not just for what it gave you, but for what it revealed about your fears, wounds, needs, and emotional patterns. And suddenly, letting go no longer feels like losing your soul. It feels like returning home to it. Because the deepest lesson heartbreak teaches is this: some people enter your life not to stay forever, but to expose the places within you that still need healing. And once the lesson is understood, the attachment slowly loses its power. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started choosing yourself. So if you are struggling to let go of someone tonight, remember this: your heart is not weak for holding on so tightly. It simply became attached to the meaning, hope, familiarity, and identity wrapped inside that connection. But healing begins the moment you realize you do not lose yourself by letting go of the wrong person. You lose yourself by refusing to. And maybe, just maybe, this ending is not here to destroy you. Maybe it arrived to introduce you to the version of yourself that no longer needs to beg for love to feel worthy of it. Because the day you stop chasing emotionally unavailable love is often the exact day your real life begins. If this message found you at the right moment, don't ignore what your heart already knows. Sometimes letting go is not the end of love. It is the beginning of freedom. Before you scroll away, take one honest second and ask yourself, who are you still holding on to? and why. If this video helped you see your pain differently, make sure to subscribe and join this journey of healing, psychology, philosophy, and emotional awakening. Because some lessons are too important to face alone. Leave a comment below with the word freedom if you're finally ready to let go of what no longer serves your soul. And share this video with someone who's silently struggling to move on. Sometimes a single message arrives at the exact moment a person needs it most. Until the next video, choose peace over attachment, truth over illusion, and yourself over emotional suffering.